It happens. It's Sunday.
You know, I think it's Sunday and not like Tuesday, Wednesday.
That's true. A day ending in Y. Ready to go? All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to our daily briefing. Today, I'll provide the update of our state COVID-19 metrics, and then I'll be happy to take questions. I want to recognize that May is National Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month, a time in which we should recognize the important role that Asian and Pacific Islander immigrants and their descendants have played in the history of this nation, and often while enduring discrimination and hate. These communities and cultures have enriched our national story and should be celebrated as such. And in the face of rising bigotry and xenophobia against the Asian American community, it's more important than ever to end these racist attacks and stand together as Illinoisans. And now for our regular update. Today we're reporting 2,994 new cases for a state total of 61,499, which includes many individuals who have already recovered. 97 of our 102 counties have known cases of COVID-19. 19,417 new tests were reported over the last 24 hours. That's our highest number of tests ever performed in a single day. And I'm deeply saddened to report that 63 lives were lost in the last 24 hours to COVID-19, for a total of 2,618 fatalities in Illinois since the beginning of this pandemic. May their memories be for a blessing. In terms of the number of COVID-19 patients and assumed COVID-19 patients in the hospital in any condition, whether mild or serious, as of midnight last night, that number was 4,701. Of those, 1,232 are in the ICU, and 759 of those ICU patients are on ventilators. Before we move to questions, I have a few brief announcements. First, on Friday, the Illinois Department of Professional and Financial Regulation announced a partnership with Illinois banks to allow non-customers to cash their stimulus checks for free. 1 in 5 Illinois households are under or unbanked, and many will receive paper stimulus checks. These partner institutions are Wells Fargo, JP Morgan Chase, US Bank, Fifth Third, and First Midwest Bank. Others may join them as well. And I want everyone who's receiving a check to get its full value. So seek out these partner institutions to cash your check, because they will not charge you any fees. I also want to address scams related to COVID-19. Reprehensible bad actors continue to use this public health emergency to prey on others. We're hearing reports of cyber scams, telephone, email, and text messaging scams, counterfeit COVID product offers, bogus door-to-door offers of COVID tests and of COVID products relating to coronavirus, solicitations for donations to phony charities related to COVID-19, and fraudulent efforts to obtain federal relief funds. The Attorney General will not hesitate to use the authority of his office and partnerships with state, local, and federal law enforcement to hold accountable anyone seeking to profit off of this pandemic. To the scam artists, you will be caught and you will be prosecuted. I'm urging all Illinois residents to be vigilant and to report any COVID-19 scams to the Attorney General's office. Finally, I want to encourage everyone to do their part in ensuring you and all Illinoisans get your fair share of federal funding and are fully represented. Fill out your census form. Every one of you, right now. Illinois has the 9th highest response rate in the nation. Let's work together to take us to the top of that list. To help us, please go online now to fill out your census form at 2020census.gov. 2020census.gov. It will take you no more than 10 minutes, and it will make a real difference to our recovery from the damage that's been done to all Illinois residents by this COVID-19 pandemic. And I'll add, once you're done with your own form, please encourage your friends to fill out theirs too. Again, 2020census.gov. Dr. Ezike and I will be back here tomorrow for our regular update, and now I'd be happy to take any questions from members of the media.
Hi, Governor. Michelle Fiore from Fox 32.
Hi, Michelle.
In the words of my colleague Elizabeth Matthews, I guess I'll go first since nobody else is here. So we were looking at the parties, obviously the situation of people having way too many people over into their homes.
Yes.
There were 2 more as far as police identified last night. And they went there, they broke up the party, but as far as we can tell, there were no citations issued. We want to know, what is it going to take to get these young people to stop congregating this way?
Well, there were many more parties planned, as you may know, that the Chicago Police Department knew about and made sure didn't happen. Those 2 may have happened. They were broken up. The fact is, people need to follow the rules. People will get sick if they don't follow the rules. We need local government and local police to make sure that people are following these rules, because, look, there's no other way for us to do it. We need the public to comply with the stay-at-home rule, because that is how we've been defeating coronavirus. We need them to comply, and those who don't comply need to be reminded that they should comply. We're not looking to have police crack down on people, arrest people. That is not the intent here, but it is true that police can break up a party and should.
Is there anything that the state can do to assist city police in this?
We sure could, and the city of Chicago, of course, has a terrific police department. Around the state, as you know, we have state troopers, state police who do an amazing job, and of course we have local elected officials who are trying to adhere to the stay-at-home order and make sure that the people who live in their cities also do. So we'll encourage that. We'll provide state police backup whenever they need it.
I've been told there are also some protests going on up in Fox Lake because of the boating restrictions that are on people these days. Now only 2 per boat. What do you say to people who are protesting the 2 per boat rule? Is there any opportunity for potentially families who have more than 2 to not have to do that?
Yeah, again, the enforcement is up to local law enforcement. We're asking them to do that, in fact. And I would remind the people that are doing it that, look, it's the data that tells us that if you're in a large group of people in a small space, if you can't maintain a 6-foot distance between each person in a party, then you shouldn't be together in that space. And many boats, most boats that people can afford, don't really make room for more than 2 people. We wanted to make sure that people who want to go fishing can do so. That's certainly an outdoor activity that everybody enjoys. Many people do anyway. And so that was the intent of the limit of 2 people. Also, the idea that if you can't maintain this 6-foot distance, you're putting yourself and your family and your friends in danger.
I want to talk a little bit about nursing homes. The case is obviously a very big concern for people who have loved ones who are in extended care facilities these
Yes.
days. Is there any opportunity for the state to include the number of cases and deaths at these facilities in the daily briefing that you do?
We provide it online. It's available at the IDPH website. So rather than go through the cases in each location, it's all there for people to access, dph.illinois.gov.
Okay. What about the public transportation in Chicago? What is being done these days to keep people from catching COVID-19 on the trains, on the buses here in the city?
Well, that's obviously the responsibility of the city and the CTA. We are talking to them and to the RTA and PACE about designing, sanitization processes that will work as we begin to reopen to non-essential businesses, as we begin to reopen the economy and more people want to take public transportation. So we want to make it safe for everybody, and the best way to do that is to let the system design something and present it to the Department of Public Health and their own local county public health and city public health officials.
A couple questions from my colleagues. Amy Jacobson from WIND. She has two questions for you. First off, you mentioned on Friday that you'll be hiring 3,000 contact tracers. Will they have any arresting authority if some people refuse to self-isolate?
No. We have
Short and
3,000.
sweet.
We may hire as many as are in the 3,000s. That's true, and no, their job is not to do that. Their job, in fact, is they'll be using a phone and calling people who've been identified as contacts of people who've been in contact with somebody who was COVID positive, tested COVID positive. So the idea here is simply to let them know they need to self-isolate, to make sure that they get tested themselves. We want to contact everybody so that we can slow the spread here, so people aren't just walking around thinking that they have never come in contact with somebody and probably don't have it, when in fact they may have been in close contact with someone.
Okay. Also from Amy, as you know, hundreds of people are getting the antibody tests right now. Are you counting those who have tested positive from the antibody test in your daily totals for COVID-19?
No. First of all, because the antibody tests are very unproven. There are lots of these tests that have a false positive or false negative rate that is unacceptable. And so until we have a very proven method of doing antibody tests, it wouldn't be useful for us to use those numbers. Having said that, we will, going forward, as tests are available that have that efficacy, we will be reporting or looking at those. We may even be initiating those for the state itself. But we don't include those numbers now in our numbers of people who've tested positive, because it's really a different thing, right? One is how many people are testing positive on an ongoing basis. We talk about each day how many new people, and that's really something to keep an eye on. The total numbers of people, less important to keep an eye on, because the truth is we haven't tested everybody in the state, and no state has. And the numbers that get reported are really a function of how many tests we do. So we're looking at the new positive tests and comparing those to the total number of tests that were done for that day, and it gives us a positivity rate that we want to track. So, but antibody tests will be important when they get more efficacious.
Okay. Question about the changes made to the stay-at-home order as of May 1st. Can you explain the reason why some businesses are now being allowed to be open and others are not, such as why hair salons, barbers, nail salons not being open, but dog and pet groomers are?
So the idea is that dog and pet groomers don't have to come within 6 feet of a human being that may have COVID-19. But at a hair salon, it would be nearly impossible for somebody to perform a haircut on somebody without being very, very close to them. So that's an example. I'm not a doctor, and I do ask the epidemiologists and experts about these things, and that's what I understand is the difference between why a dog groomer, for example, and not a barber.
Okay. Question from Greg Bishop at the Center Square. The president's economic advisor today said there could be a relief package for state and local governments, but there are some concessions sought, including reversing sanctuary city policies. Republicans have pushed for pension reform and local government unfunded mandate relief before Illinois gets federal funds to plug budget problems that existed before the pandemic. What concessions are you willing to give in on in exchange for federal aid?
Well, I'm not negotiating that package. I mean, I'm the governor of a state, not a senator or a congressman. But I certainly would say that we should try to leave politics out of this and instead look at what the damage is that's been done to all the states, those who are represented by Republicans, those who are represented by Democrats, and try to help them, all of us, fill the hole that's been made by coronavirus.
Also from Greg Bishop, have you asked for an analysis of the economic, societal, and health damage that you acknowledge your shutdown is having on Illinoisans to compare that to the health impacts from COVID-19?
I haven't sought out an assessment. I will say that there are lots of organizations. I think the University of Illinois put out some information like that. Lots of folks who are trying to estimate what the future of our economy will look like going forward. And so I look at those, certainly. But to be clear, and I know the way the question is phrased, it's as if someone caused this. The reality is that COVID-19 is causing this. The fact that it is a new coronavirus, the fact that virtually, well, most of the states, almost all of the states, put in a stay-at-home order or lots of restrictions because the mitigation efforts were necessary because so little preparation was made, and it was very difficult for anybody to get a handle on this early on. So, it will be interesting to see what the damage that was done by the virus was in retrospect. At this point, it's almost impossible to measure.
Is there any plan for the state to put together a stimulus package for the people of our state, such as what the federal government did for the whole country?
I would say we are trying to look at those. How can the state be helpful all across the state? I mean, one of the things I've talked about is our small businesses. We obviously also need to maintain and even build up our public health resources, as well as providing healthcare services to people. So those are all things that will help to rescue people in the state. But to do more, we really will need support from the federal government directly to our state revenue line. And that's why we've asked for help. And that's why virtually every state in the United States has gone to the federal government to look for a replacement of lost revenues.
We've got a lot of questions online, so we'll do 2 more in the room and then go online.
Okay, another one from Alex Dagman, another reporter. He wants to know, speaking of the bank institutions that are allowing people to cash their checks, is this just for Illinois residents, or could, say, a Missouri resident cross the border and take advantage?
I believe this is for anybody that's got a check that's been issued by the federal government, but I don't know, and I can find out.
Okay, and one more. Will Stevenson, reporter from Galesburg. Less than 48 hours after the Galesburg High School announced plans to have an in-person graduation ceremony, Illinois State Board of Education put out an order banning any such ceremonies. If a school district can have an in-person ceremony for a class of 2020 in a socially distant, safe, and responsible manner, why not allow the school district to give the students the closure they want? In this case, parents and students voted overwhelmingly that they did want the actual graduation ceremony.
I think as of yesterday, the Illinois State Board of Education actually put out guidelines so that there could be graduation ceremonies, and they tried to make it available to people to organize something that would maintain social distance and following epidemiological suggestions about how to do it. Because look, I'm as concerned as anybody to make sure that people have at least something to celebrate their graduations. I mean, it's a sad fact that many seniors, high school and college seniors, aren't going to be able to have a usual graduation. So we want something special for everybody, and so the Illinois State Board of Education has put out guidelines for that. Yep. Thank you.
Shia Politico, Governor, what are you hearing from Washington and the White House in regards to the next relief package and to what extent it might help city and state governments?
Yeah, I regularly speak with people in Washington. I was on the phone with the minority leader of the Senate just yesterday, and have spoken with the minority whip in the Senate. That's our senior senator, Dick Durbin. And so I get regular updates, and it looks like there is real support on the Republican side and near unanimous support on the Democratic side for support for the states, and I would say near unanimous support by governors for support for states as well as local governments. And I'll just add one more thing. I really think it's important that we address the challenges of smaller local governments and not just those that have 500,000 or more people in them. We have a lot of cities and and counties across the state that need help, and that's true in most states. So I'm fighting hard for them too.
Hannah at the Daily Line. Governor Pritzker, I understand you've made a commitment to signing an executive order to delay the deadline for Illinois hotels to install so-called panic buttons, which was included in a package of anti-sexual harassment legislation passed last spring. The sponsors say they'll pass a bill to put off the deadline when lawmakers return to Springfield, but in the interim, you'll likely have to take executive action. When will you sign the order, and how long will you put off the deadline?
A final decision hasn't been made about that. I do support those panic buttons. They're very important. And that's something that I have fought for, was, happy to support as a candidate as well as governor.
On a lighter note, Hannah would like to know if you've heard about the murder hornets.
I have heard about these hornets that apparently are ravaging bees, and so all I can say is I'm allergic to bee stings. So I'm not sure if I'm not sure what it means for me, but I will say we have a lot of challenges. I'm as somebody who's been staying at home, working every day, and so on. I haven't had time to spend focusing on the murder hornets.
Jim Haggerty at Rock River Times. Based on reports from around the country, no states are short on ventilators. Could that change, and how does Illinois stand on its supply in case of a possible surge in the fall?
So, this question about ventilators, when we started, when this pandemic came upon us, we looked at the inventory of ventilators, looked at the numbers that were being used in places like Italy and Spain and elsewhere, and China, and said, we don't have enough ventilators. And so we began a process to make sure that if we couldn't bend the curve, that we could keep people alive. And so we sought out ventilators wherever we could. The state of California was kind enough, as they started to bend their curve, to offer us 100 of their ventilators, which was great. But we only had about 2,200 in the state total. And we needed, according to the models that we had looked at back then, unless something changed, we might need more than 4,000. So as it turns out, our stay-at-home order and all the other restrictions, the mitigation efforts that we put in place have worked. And so we do not need all the ventilators that we thought we would. We have, in fact, sent the 100 back to California so that they could be sent to somebody else who may need them. And we are hoping that the ventilators, and we've acquired a number of ventilators just since then. We have over 3,000 of them now. We hope that that inventory and the fact that there's a lot of availability right now will be enough in case there is another surge.
Rich Miller at Capital Facts. Jared Kushner told the Washington Post on Saturday with regards to testing, quote, "The biggest thing holding us back is not supplies or capacity. It's the state's ability to collect more samples." Is that true for Illinois? Why or why not?
Well, to collect samples is just one piece of the puzzle to get tests done. You need machines. Yes, we have machines that exist in the state of Illinois, though they don't belong to the state. They don't belong to anybody except private enterprises typically, or private nonprofit hospitals. And so getting access to those machines and their capacity is one thing you need to accomplish. Another is you need the swabs, and that's the ability to take a sample. That's true. We need swabs. We don't have enough swabs, though we're getting more from the White House, actually. We're getting some more this month. But you also need viral transport medium, and you need the reagents that are necessary to run the test. So if you have all of those things, by the way, you also need more lab technicians to run the machine so you can run all these. So I just mentioned at least 4 or 5 pieces of it. So I would say that the statement by Jared Kushner is a little bit inaccurate, but I am glad that there is a recognition that that we need more of the pieces of the puzzle to get the testing done, because it's true.
Estefania from Univision. Cook County is now the county with the 3rd highest number of cases in the U.S., being only behind New York. Can you share any insight into why Cook County numbers are so high?
because we're doing a lot more testing than most places in the country, and that's the truth. So that's why I would discourage people from just looking at the gross number of tests that are being done in a state or in a county. We have built up our testing. I mean, today was our highest ever at 19,000+. And, you know, just a few weeks ago, we were at 4,000 and 5,000 just 2 weeks ago, I think, and we intend to go higher. Many other places are choosing not to test, which means that they don't show new new cases, because if it's not a confirmed case, it doesn't get counted usually. So I would just say that I would ignore a little bit the gross testing numbers and instead look at the positivity rate. How many people did we test? Among the people we tested, how many tested positive? That is a number that ought to be going down. For us, that's varied between about 21 and 15%. We want it to go down even further. It's an indication that there is a lower infection rate across the state.
Dave Dalla, WTAX, how long can a plateau last?
I hope it doesn't last too long, but it's unknown. This is a new coronavirus, and different states, different localities are experiencing different curves. But I'm hoping that we're in a flattened curve now. I'm hoping, again, you just know that by watching it day in and day out, and that we begin to fall off that curve and our numbers begin to decline.
Mike at Quincy TV, more people are ignoring your stay-at-home order and gathering in large groups, but some gatherings are ending in violence. 200 people were together around 3 a.m. before a man was killed in a double shooting in Peoria. What do you suggest local leaders do to enforce your order when people are going out regardless?
Well, again, I mean, I certainly don't want to put anybody in danger by suggesting that law enforcement needs to go break up a group of 3,000. On the other hand, it is against the order, and law enforcement does have that ability. What I would say to people in Peoria and elsewhere in East Peoria, et cetera, is that there's a reason why we put these orders forward. It's to keep people safe. It's because this virus really knows no boundaries. One person in the middle of that 3,000 can cause many others to get infected, and each one of those people has the ability to infect others. And so we won't know really for a couple of weeks how many people in Peoria have gotten sick because people were irresponsible and got together. And I am sorry to hear that there was violence attendant with all of that, but people should follow the rules here, and in relatively short order we'll begin to see, as the economy opens up, things will get better for everyone.
Kelly from Block Club, a recent Tribe story showed a disconnect between young people of color and the media and government. What can or should officials be doing to better reach young people of color to warn them about COVID?
Yesterday, you saw that I had with me Jamal Cole from an organization here in Chicago that does tremendous work working with young people in the African American community and the Latino community too. Many of those leaders have the ability to speak, I think forcefully to their colleagues, their peers, to convince them so they understand that this virus can attack somebody in their 20s just as it can, or in their teens just as it can somebody who is 40 years old or over. And the fact is that we need to do more messaging around this. People need to understand how serious it is. And look, even if you think you're invincible and you're in your 20s, here's what can happen. You could get coronavirus and not suffer very badly from it, but you will be carrying it around and giving it to others. Do you have a grandmother? Do you have a parent? Do you have a friend who is older than you, who has a comorbidity, who might have diabetes or has heart disease? You're putting them at risk when you are willing to, ignore the rules that we've put in place here.
Natalie Moore at WBEZ. DCFS has ended visits for parents with children in foster care. Advocates across the state say DCFS should not have a blanket order and allow parents to have in-person visits with precautions. Do you think accommodations should be made?
We certainly are looking. I mean, DCFS is looking at all the accommodations that they can make, and so I am sad for foster parents and kids can't get together. The biological parents and kids who can't get together. DCFS has created, though, video conferencing and other methods for contacting, for getting those folks together so they can at least have some ongoing dialogue in place of getting together personally. But look, this is about protecting people, and we don't think this will go forever. This, in fact, is something that we're trying to get through to make sure that that as people get sick, we're not overrunning the hospitals, and that we're able to develop a treatment. So this is really about a relatively short period of time in which there is difficulty accommodating those kinds of visits, but we'll try to work through them best we can.
Sophia at the AP, a Northern Illinois church that sued had services today with more than the allotted 10 people, saying 100 were there. Will there be consequences?
Yeah, I understand that their temporary restraining order was denied in court. I heard that just a few minutes before coming out here. And so they shouldn't have been having services at all, except if they were in groups of 10 or less. Again, this is temporary, and people need to understand that, especially faith leaders, that keeping your parishioners safe is the most important thing that you can do. Your leadership matters here, and we're not stopping you from praying. We're not stopping you from connecting with your parishioners. What we are trying to stop is the spread of this invisible killer.
Okay, this will be our last question from Christine at NPR Illinois. We received a question from a listener who says a relative is dying of cancer and lives in Colorado. Would it be legal to travel there to help family?
Look, there's nothing that stops a person from going to Colorado. Is that where it was? Colorado to be with their family member. But I would just say that there are a lot of, if you're driving, there are a lot of places that you would need to stop along the way and need to be extraordinarily careful. There are airplanes that are still flying. You have the ability to get on an airplane. Again, I think most of the airlines are requiring face coverings now. So it's really a matter of whether you can do it safely. That's the most important thing. Nobody's going to arrest anybody who's attempting to get to a family member who's ill.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.